For the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for June 6th, 2022. Let the record show that Councilor Hulteen contacted me and was not feeling well tonight, and perhaps we will see Councilor Dozman. I haven't heard from her yet. So. She's late. Okay, so we'll look for Councilor Dozman. So, thank you all for being here. We have 3 items on our agenda tonight, discussion items, 38th Avenue West street improvements from Kipling Street to Youngfield Street. Item number 2 is campaign finance code, fairness, transparency, and impartiality, an update on that, and some action possibilities there. And number 3 is an update on our strategic plan. As we usually do, we will start our meeting tonight with any comments from the public on any of these agenda items. So I have no one signed up to speak, but if there's anyone here in City Hall who would like to speak on any of these agenda items, or anyone online, you may do so now. I will check and see if you're online and would like to speak. Please raise your hand in the virtual format. We'll bring you into the meeting, and I'll check with our clerk to see if we have anybody with their hand up.
Nope, the only person online is City Attorney Jerry Dahl.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Dahl, for joining us tonight. So we will close our public's right to speak and go to agenda item number 1. This is the West 38th Avenue, 38th West Street improvements. It's 38th Avenue West street improvements, I guess. There's too many streets and avenues there. Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on this?
We do. Mr. Johnstone's going to start off.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor and Patrick. Well, this item is coming to you from yourselves. It's an item on your strategic plan from 2021-2022. It's a council priority to look at, consideration of, multimodal improvements on 38th Avenue between Kipling and Youngfield as this scope of work. I would just note anecdotally it comes up a lot in our community outreach, and certainly was one of the top priorities that came out of the Applewood area through the Let's Talk program last year, or maybe that was early this year. So it definitely seems to garner a lot of community interest, and that's the process that we hope to be about to embark on. We were in front of City Council last December to just kind of introduce the notion of what a scope of work would look like, and get your thumbs up to develop that scope of work, and we've done that over the intervening months. And so now we're seeking your blessing of sorts on the scope that was included in your packet, and if we receive that, we will proceed for a solicitation for consulting services and really hit this project pretty quickly. We've got I think a fairly aggressive schedule to begin working on it yet this summer in terms of getting that consultant scope out on the street. Mark Westberg is here to do a brief presentation, and then Steve Wynn, our engineering manager, is also here as a resource should you have any questions for all of us. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mark.
Thanks. I realized just a minute ago that I had to cancel a City Council study session meeting last year about this time because I couldn't talk without coughing because I was having an asthma attack. So I'm doing much better this year. So I feel pretty good about that, having just moved and all the dust that's involved with that. So just a little bit of history on 38th West. It was included originally. There was a project for this included right after I started in late 2007 in the 2008 ballot project list. That ballot initiative was unsuccessful. There were a host of projects on that list. This was one of those. And then in 2017, Kaiser gave us a grant to work on trying to improve active facilities. And as noted in the council packet, there were a few things that were actually implemented based on that outreach that Kaiser did, the Kaiser grant funded. And then as Ken mentioned, in 2021, we had the Applewood Let's Talk. This was like our inaugural area to do Let's Talk, and so we had a lot of great feedback on that, and 38th West came up a lot. Also in 2021, Council established their strategic plan that included this project, projects on 38th Avenue. in it. And then exactly 6 months ago today, we came to council, and it wasn't me, it was Ken and Steve came and talked with you about what the possibilities were, where we might land, and what we might do. And we've been working on this scope of work for a while, and so we're finally ready to present that to council and talk with you guys about it. Just to sort of, as a refresher on what 38th West is, it's 1 3/4 miles, almost exactly. It was very, very close when you measured from Kipling to Youngfield. So it's a pretty long stretch of road. Most of our segments between major streets are more like 1.5 miles. This one's a little bit longer than that. So it's a little longer than 1.5 miles. It's considered a minor arterial on our street classification. It's mostly 2 lanes with some turn lanes at sort of busier places. So as you get closer to Youngfield and you get closer to Kipling, you tend to have a little more stuff because we need it for the capacity and the increased traffic we have in those areas. There are scattered, and we should probably say widely scattered, bike ped facilities along this corridor, most of which are not great. Most of the ones that are there have been implemented as a part of development projects that have happened, and based on our master plans and things, we had people build what little bit is out there. Coincidentally, Route 38, RTD Route 38, with several bus stops, runs along 38th Avenue. There's 1 school on the corridor towards the west end, Strand, and there are 2 other schools that are close enough that people, if there was a facility there, could use 38 to get to that school, should they desire to do so by something other than a car. There are shopping centers at both ends. There's Applewood Shopping Center, one of our premier shopping centers at the west end, and then a smaller shopping center where Sprouts and Starbucks, Starbucks is everywhere. We can't use that as a locator. Sprouts and a few other things are located at the east end. So there's a lot of stuff happening on this corridor at both ends and in the middle. And then we have a lot of relatively small multifamily complexes through the corridor. There's a lot of places that have 20 to 30 units or so. There's nothing major like you see what's being built out at Clear Creek Crossing right now, but lots of multifamily up and down the corridor. So those are sort of all the things that are there. The things that aren't there is we don't really have adequate or consistent bike ped facilities. What's there generally is you got a shoulder to walk on. And the way people drive distracted these days, it's kind of nice to have a piece of curb between you and the traffic sometimes when you're walking. The drainage facilities really for the middle 2/3 of the corridor are not adequate. Ms. Weaver knows a lot about that. Well, it's sort of the detention pond for the whole area, right? So, and we've got a lot of above ground utilities through there that we don't necessarily have in some other parts of our city, and there's a fair number of below grade utilities also. So that sort of paints the picture of what's happening on 38th. So what we want to do before we just leap into design, because we don't think we're ready to do design, is to do a study and figure out what needs to happen. There are widely varying conditions along the corridor. Like I mentioned, we've got the 2 commercial centers at either end. We've got a lot of residential through the bulk of the corridor, but we also have schools and other things that are destinations and things like that. So we really want to do a lot of public engagement on this project and really gauging what the public wants and then trying to figure out what the public needs. And those 2 things don't always marry up nicely. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. So we want to do a lot of public engagement out there with the folks that are there. And we've got a great jump start on that with the Let's Talk program. We had a lot of really actively engaged folks. One of my neighbors at my old house, his mom lives on the corridor, and she corralled me one night at a meeting to talk about it. So the goals of this study, and this really is sort of like thinking about the studies that we've done in the past recently. We did a study for 38th East between Watts and Harlan. That was pretty comprehensive and had a lot of public involvement. And then we've done a study for Wadsworth before we kicked off the environmental process. And so as we put this scope together, we sort of married what was in those things to try to get the same outcome where we do have the goals that we have here, which is primarily the goal is to improve the multimodal facilities. That's what's in the council's strategic plan. But we also want to make sure that we accommodate the existing and the future traffic needs. We don't want to neglect the cars in an effort to try to serve all the folks that aren't in cars, because that just makes things unsafe also. We want to accommodate the drainages there and deal with what's happening in the middle of the corridor. We need to take care of the utilities that are there. If they're in the way of the stuff we're going to be building, we'll have to figure out where those go. We need to accommodate those existing RTD facilities that are along 30th Avenue to keep those things operational and viable. Like I said, we've got a lot of multifamily through that corridor, so we've got a fairly high bus usage through the corridor. And our goal in all of this is to try to come up with a recommended alternative. And I threw an S on there too, because of the widely varying nature of the corridor, we might end up with several alternatives. I don't think we're going to we're doing this from one end to the other all the way down. I think we'll have things will vary. We have sort of pockets of interest around the schools and around Parfit and around Miller really, and at the other end. So we'll have to look and see what we end up with at all those various locations. So from a design standpoint, the things that we'll do there is look at the existing conditions from a traffic standpoint and look at the future conditions from a traffic standpoint. One of the things that will come out of this study will be conceptual plans. Our goal will be to have 30%, what we call 30% plans, conceptual plans, just really sort of early plans that sort of make sure that what we're hoping to do will work. Certainly nothing we could build off of. So it'd be based on the recommended alternatives. It would include what's called a storm sewer outfall system plan. We talked about that a little bit in the memo. The Mile High Flood District, which we're a member of, and the mayor is a sitting board member, does a great job of helping us deal with our drainage infrastructure. We've got a lot of pipes in the ground in the city that the district helped us with decades ago, really. And so our hope would be is if we produce a plan that meets their requirements, then they'll help us be able to maybe pay for half the construction of the storm sewer that we've got to build on the corridor. The plan will probably also include construction phasing. This is a very long thing. I don't think we can just tear it all up and build it at once. For perspective, Wadsworth from 35th to the north end is 1.25 miles. This is a half-mile longer. So it's even longer than Wadsworth is. And with all the schools and things, we'd look at probably doing phasing over at least 1 or 2 or 3 construction seasons to try to reduce the impact on the school traffic that we've got out there. We've got to look at what our right-of-way needs may be. Most of the corridor's got about 60 feet of right-of-way, which we hope is going to be adequate for what we're going to plug in there, depending on what we decide to plug in there. But there are a few pockets where it's maybe 50 feet wide. We may have to acquire a little bit of right-of-way in a couple of places. And then, of course, we'll want to get cost estimates on this to see how much it'll cost. And cost estimates are a little bit of a throwing darts with a blindfold on at this point, just because costs are a little crazy right now. Having just remodeled a townhome, I know what that's all about. What we're going to do staffing-wise on this is the staff involvement will be the community development engineering group. That'd be Steve and I and a couple of others will help to sort of do the project management, or as I like to say, herd the cats, and keep everything moving forward. We'll also be reviewing all the technical documents that come from the engineering folks on the traffic analysis and those kind of things. And then our outreach specialists are going to be really involved in the public engagement. We've already put them on notice. They know it's coming. They're bracing for impact. They know the neighborhood really well. They had a lot of participation in Let's Talk. They've got a good list of contacts. They've got a lot of comments that came during that that will help to inform how we proceed with this before we even really start the public engagement. So we're going to do all of that. And then we will be hiring consultants to prepare those plans and to prepare the study too. So we'll be having the consultants help us with all of that. That's part of the cat herding that we have to do. So funding for 38 West. Our estimated cost right now, we've looked at the planning study. We think it's going to be about $700,000. But with the way things are right now, we're giving this a pretty broad range because we just don't know. What we've heard from a lot of consultants is they've had to increase their salaries for the folks that are working there because of just the way the market's going and the way things are happening. So our plan at this point, if council's okay with that, was that we would get a budget supplemental from those unrestricted reserves that we talked about. Was that just a month ago or 2 months ago? To pay for this, and hopefully it's closer to the $700,000 range than it is the $1 million range. Preliminary and final design, we're estimating about $2 million, and then in the funding source, we do not have a funding source identified for the design for this. And then construction, right now we're estimating about $15 million, and again, we need a revenue source for that. So those numbers are based on what we're doing up at 52nd Avenue between Tabor and Ward. I just basically took what we spent on design and what we hope to spend on construction up there and factored it up, thinking that our cross-section might be somewhat similar to what's happening up there. So that's where those numbers are coming from. So our next steps, as Ken alluded to, is this summer, we're going to hopefully get consultant selection started. We've got the scope of work completed, pending council's consensus to move forward. If council, sorry, I've got something in my eye. I have to pause and rub. If council gives us consensus to move forward, then we'll immediately work with our contracting folks to get that advertised just as quickly as we can and get that out there. It takes about, 3 months from the time we advertise to the time that we're able to come to council to award the contract. So we'll look at that. We'll do the budget supplemental at the same time, because that way we can just do the supplemental for how much the contract is going to be for. And then in the fall, I think we'll do a lot of our initial public outreach, and we'll look at the traffic, the drainage, and utilities. Most of the time, we try to avoid school traffic when we're doing traffic analysis, because it's such an outlier, that 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon where things are just psychotic. But given the nature of what's going on here, we think getting the school traffic in the analysis is going to be really critically important for what's happening at Strand and happening down Parfit Street and then happening, down Kipling Street, or continuing east on 38th to the high school. So I think capturing that school analysis, the timing on that actually works out really well for us this time. We hope to, in the winter time, which will be maybe a 3 to 6 month period, work on developing those recommended alternatives. There will be some additional public outreach. We'll get that initial outreach to sort of figure out what we think the public wants or what they tell us they want. And then we'll look at our analysis of everything. We'll try to marry those two things together and go back out to the public and say, here's where we think we landed. Is this okay with everyone? And here's where we think we're going to proceed. And then we'll put conceptual plans together really through about this time next year. And then we'd probably do some more additional public outreach just at the very end, just to show the public where we landed with everything. Sometimes when we're starting these things, we think, yeah, we can do this, this, and this, and then we get out there and find out that there's some really nasty stuff in the way that we can't avoid, and we've got to maybe shrink some things down or do some things a little differently. So those are the things that we're looking at from a scheduling standpoint. And this is just a picture of an example of the 38th Avenue corridor with the shoulders on the side, the 2 lanes, and just sort of the plethora of the different kinds of things that are out there.
So with that, we are available for questions. As Mark noted, we're looking for consensus on the scope of work, and with that, we'll go out to develop a bid documents for consulting services. So that's where we're at.
Councilor Hoppe.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Do we have, I saw that there is some points in the memo that are kind of referring to the active living neighborhood grant that we received, some information that we got from that. Do we have like a full report from that? I know that Local Works managed that, and so it wouldn't have been an in-house report, but do we have a report that they shared with us on that?
Looks like Steve Wynn has an answer for that.
Thank you.
Steve has the answers. I was being wazzed at the time.
Yeah, I was involved in that process too. I don't think we got a report from that, but they did have a consultant provided some designs that kind of reflected upon community outreach effort through the Live Well program. And there were several design options to accommodate pedestrian crossings and all of that. So we have those. The intention of those is when we're engaging this study, we introduce those to part of the consideration in the design process.
Great, thanks. I just wanted to make sure we weren't doing double work, so thank you.
Yeah, whatever they have, we'll be sure we get at the outset of the project.
Councilor Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would definitely encourage doing the study with the school traffic, because Strand is a pretty quickly growing school and Prospect Valley is massive. So traffic on Parfait and is at a standstill at 2:45 in the afternoon, and the traffic at Strand is pretty terrible as well. As far as, I know we've talked about paying for this before by going to maybe another ballot initiative, something like that. When would the soonest we could do that be? Or when are we looking at that?
Yeah, that's definitely one option. Right now, we believe, or actually we could go at any time, really, if you want to break it down to that, but I think there's better times than others. We believe the current temporary sales tax increase will expire either in 12 years or when we raise $38.5 million. We believe we'll raise $38.5 million at the end of 2023. So, you know, my thought is it'd be nice to ask for an extension of that sales tax before it expires. So, am I getting those dates right? Do you remember? So, yeah, potentially go with that November of next year. You know, some recommend that that type of question, you go during a general election, which wouldn't be until 2024, which we could, but the tax will probably expire by that time. So we have options, but we could go as soon as 2023.
Okay. So ideally, we package it with like 4 other projects.
Yeah, or whatever, yeah, council wants to do something very similar to what we did with 2E, I think is kind of what I would recommend, but I think we have options. There's a lot of other funding still out there right now through Congress, so we're looking at all of that, those options too.
Great. I would just encourage everybody to support this. It's a very popular thing in District 3. As I was walking and campaigning, that was the first thing that came up in a lot of conversations, especially along that corridor. And I think I haven't met anybody who doesn't want it at this point, so I think this is definitely something we need to move forward with.
Councilor Weaver.
Thank you. I also just want to voice my support for this, and thank you for your presentation. Around all these things, especially even with last week, some great drainage stuff to see on 38th down that hill. And so if any of you have spent any time on that corridor, there's so many kids walking. It's really just so dangerous to get on a bike. I sort of dodge traffic going out to my mailbox. We just have to deal with this, so I'd really appreciate the support on this initiative as well. Thanks.
Councilor Nosler-Back.
Patrick mentioned this, but I think it's really important also to just mention that 38 now has, especially with the new hook ramps and everything, it's just really become such a major access point to I-70. And to the grant and some of that work where we did a lot of work with Live Well on, you know, reminding people that that's a residential street is so important. And so just to Janice's point, I think it's just really important that we include that information. But also on the congressional funding piece, just with the infrastructure dollars that are coming through right now, if there's ways for us to somehow connect this to some of the EV things that we're doing in the community and making those connections, maybe we can find other ways to fund this outside of going to the ballot. I mean, or maybe we have to do 3 different ways of funding this, but let's try and stay really creative on that.
Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. The first question is the city going to consider adding a pedestrian crosswalk near Strand?
I think that would be something that will truth out during the study. Certainly if there's a lot of folks crossing there, and one would expect there would be, that might be something that really rises to the top. But we as staff are trying to really enter this with an open mind and not really go in with any preconceived notions of what need to be done where. We're certainly going to use all of the feedback we got from Let's Talk. We're going to use all of the feedback the results of that Kaiser study, the Live Well thing that was done. We're going to use those things to help inform the direction forward. And then, certainly all the feedback that we receive from folks in the public outreach we're going to be doing. So my inclination is something will rise to the top around Strand, but we're trying not to predispose, and we're trying not to, really direct the consultants. We want the process to really sort of truth out and figure out what needs to be done where.
Okay. I know that was an issue brought up by some of the constituents in that area. The other question I have is there any existing water infrastructure that may need to be replaced?
Like storm sewer or water lines?
Yeah, like potable water.
The potable water? I don't know because those are all private districts.
Okay.
We'll certainly do with them what we've done on our other major projects like 29th and Wads, and we'll get those guys involved very early. And if they decide they want to replace lines while we're tearing up the street, it saves them a lot of money in traffic control and demo and replacement costs. So we'll certainly partner with our special districts for all those things as we go along.
Thank you.
Additional discussion? Councilor Hobby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask for a consensus to give staff direction to begin the consulting selection process with the proposed scope of work for the planning study following the details outlined in the memo.
Looks like we have consensus to move forward on that. Did you have any more questions on that, or?
No, thank you very much.
Okay.
We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Westberg, for a good presentation. All right, with that, we will go to agenda item number 2. This is a campaign finance code, fairness, transparency, and impartiality. Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on
We
this
do, and he
item?
just left us, our city clerk, but Mr. Dahl is also online. He's going to help with the discussion. Mr. Kirkpatrick, are you still in the building? Yeah, could you bring Jerry up, Marianne? Thank you. We could go to item 3 if you'd like, if he doesn't come back, but.
Okay, we'll give him, while we have just a break in the action, we'd like to welcome Councilor Dozman to the meeting. Thank you. We may be just a little bit more efficient than we had anticipated.
Well, anytime you follow Mark Westberg in a PowerPoint, you assume you have plenty of time.
Good point. There he comes.
Okay. That's okay. Okay, so our city clerk, Mr. Kirkpatrick, is going to be here to introduce agenda item number 2. This is a campaign finance code, fairness, transparency, and impartiality. Please have a seat.
During last fall's election campaign, citizens began to distribute a flyer in the District 3 race, which supported the candidacy of Mr. Figlis, and at the same time accused his opponent, Councilmember Weaver, of taking money from developers, of selling her boat, all sorts of things. She asked me to investigate what was going on. This report is not about the investigation, except to the extent it led us to the conclusion we needed to look at the city's campaign finance code. And that's what I want to talk about this evening and why I want to talk about it. You have to begin with 2 very specific backdrops. 1, the First Amendment to the Constitution protects political speech, even if it is completely fallacious. I can stand up and say at length that the 2020 election was stolen from former President Trump. Whether that's a fact or not doesn't matter. I am allowed to stand up and say that. The second overarching thing we have to be very careful to remember is that opposing high-density housing in Wheatridge is a valid public policy argument. The issue becomes, what are we going to call high-density housing? How do we debate the specifics of that kind of a policy? Do we know who stands for what in that debate? Do we know who is advocating for what? Do we know who is paying for that advocacy? At the current time, we do not. if we apply the current campaign finance laws, we reach an impasse. And among the many things that the city attorney, Mr. Dahl, and I have discussed at length, and thank you profusely, Jerry, for all of the wisdom and help you provided for me during that process. Under the current law, which is both city code and the Fair Campaign Practices Act, if anybody goes out into the public in a group of 2 or more people and starts distributing literature, putting up billboards, doing any public act that says, I am for or against this candidate, or I am for or against this issue, then the law requires that group to come to the clerk's office and register as a political committee. I'm not going to get down into the weeds of different kinds of political committees because it's not relevant. When Ms. Weaver filed her formal complaint against a group called Save Our Neighborhoods, she did that based on the fact that on the flyer they had distributed, they printed, go to saveourneighborhoods.com for more information. They did not register as a political committee in 2021. In 2019, when they opposed the Upham zoning change, they did register as a political committee. And since they registered as a political committee, they have not filed a single document with the clerk's office. No campaign finance reports, nothing. What did they say in that flyer? Besides, Councilmember Weaver is on the take. She always votes for the developers. These are folks who, of course, who would say that everybody in this room, with the possible exception of the officer sitting in the back, is on the take from somebody. They say it all the time. They say it to anyone who will listen. The flyer said that Councilmember Weaver's opponent, Mr. Igor Figlas, worked tirelessly on both the 2019 and 2020 referendum efforts and was the official proponent of the 2020 referendum petition, end quote. Now, what they do after the fact is I go to them and I say, please tell us what your role was in this campaign. We have written responses from Mr. Figlas, who categorically denies that he had anything to do with any activity related to that flyer. He also asserted in writing in a letter to the clerk's office that he was never involved, he had no role to play in Save Our Neighborhoods in 2021. And as Mr. Dahl has sagely taught me, when someone tells you something like that in writing, you believe it until they tell you something different. However, we also have other information that might be relevant to that question, such as Mr. Figlas has categorically denied that he was involved with them in 2021. Prior to 2021, in October of 2020, he was quoted in the newspaper as saying he was behind the effort to put the petition into the city's streets and get the issue on the ballot for the Hill family. He makes public statements here in this chamber on a regular basis about his involvement with this issue. But suddenly in the fall of 2021, he had completely removed himself from any involvement with that group. Where did they cross the line? One, they failed to register, as I indicated, by law. They did not file any campaign finance reports for their 2019 activities. And indeed, when we asked the people who registered in 2019, they abjectly refused to file any campaign reports. One of them sent in a filing to the clerk's office on a campaign finance form, which said in handwritten words on its face, there is no committee, there is no Save Our Neighborhoods. I'm only filing this because I was ordered to file it, and I admit to no wrongdoing by filing this form. I will leave it to you to decide whether there's more credibility to the notion that some of these folks were or were not involved in the election campaign in 2021. So what's the big deal? Since they don't exist, I will refer to them as the group formerly known as Save Our Neighborhoods, even though they were probably card-carrying members of that listening now. They are exercising their First Amendment right to oppose candidates and support issues and support candidates, to persuade people to vote their way. So how do they do it? Well, they tell lies. They lie about anything and everything that will help them further their cause. And I realize that no one ever stands up in this forum and speaks as frankly as I am right now, but somebody has to stand up and call it what it is. For instance, we have heard repeatedly that the government here does not listen to the people. First time I heard that was when Larry Matthews from the NC on the dais said that during the October 2019 election campaign. My guess is that they have been saying it for a decade or more. In 2020, and these are only the falsehoods that I can verify and document, someone spread a rumor that you need to sign the petition to keep the Hardys from developing their property because if you allow zoning change and they build what they want to build, flooding will close down the intersection of 38th Avenue and Kipling Street. Despite the fact that we have water engineering reports that say quite simply, that's not going to happen. A little old Jerry may remember this incident, and he may not because we're both so old now we forget everything.
You speak for yourself, Steve.
A resident who had signed that petition called my office and said, I want my name removed. And I said, why don't you want your name on the petition? She said, because they told me that he didn't sign the petition after the Hardys build their 10 housing units. 2 years later, they can put up a 10-story apartment building at 38th and Johnson if they want to.
Mr. Kirkpatrick,
Yes, sir.
would it be possible to sort of get to the
facts.
the questions that are going to be before us, I think?
Okay. All right. Let me do that.
And I think there are three. They're on your May 25th memo, Steve.
They are.
On the first page, there are three specific requests for consensus you're asking from the council for us to pursue drafting. Obviously, if council likes or gives us consensus on any one or all of these, as mentioned in the memos you have in the packet, there's a fair amount of research to be done and careful drafting to characterize any code changes consistent with the case law out there, which is pretty protective, as you see from the memos, of the First Amendment rights that Steve's been talking about. And so the action will be dollar thresholds and some other triggers that are ones that we think are defensible against the case law before we start requiring people to file things and do things. That those actions and amounts of money spent need to rise to a level we think work with the case law. So I want to make sure council understands that what I think we're looking for tonight is should there be a requirement at some level of filing a political committee after there's been an issue of a referendum form requested and some activity on it. You know, the specific trigger point for requiring that, council, if you want us to go down that road, you'd be directing us to figure that out and make sure it's defensible. That's kind of the level of the question, I think, that Steve's asking for your reaction to. Sorry, Steve.
No reason to apologize. That was a good introduction. So the first provision I want council to consider would require two or more individuals who start to engage in public activities in an election campaign, either for or against a candidate or an issue, they would need to come in and register as a political committee. Currently, if they choose not to do that, there's no way I can require that they do it. The second thing I would like for council to consider is an ordinance that says whenever two or more persons contact the clerk's office and what they want to do is circulate a referendum petition, that those folks at the same time, they are required to come to the clerk's office. I am required to provide them the petition form. At least two people have to be listed on that petition form as the persons organizing the circulation of the petition. I want the council to require those 2 or 3 or 4 or 12, or whatever it is, a certain number of individuals to not only get the petition, but also to register as a political committee at the same time. That will allow us to say who is saying what and where their money is coming from, who are the people behind this, and who's paying for it. We did an exhaustive, and I have to thank Jerry as well as his partner, Carmen Beery, whom I'm sure you all know. And Jerry, refresh my memory, what is that young legal intern's name who worked on?
Oh, that's Nick Klein, who's busily right now studying for the bar exam. We've made him an offer, and with any luck, only if he passes that bar exam, he gets hired by us. So hopefully this fall, he'll be a full-fledged lawyer, and we can extend him an offer, which we've done, but we're not going to hire him until he passes the bar. You know, that's how that is.
My guess is he'll not have any trouble passing the bar from just one conversation with him. He's going to work his heart out until he does. He did an excellent job of reviewing the case law and code and statutes. And he believes we can do this. The third one is probably the most controversial. And here's what we come up with. When I went to the folks who were formerly known as Save Our Neighborhoods and asked them to file their 2019 reports, asked them to file as a political committee for their activities in the 2021 election, nope. I can fine them $50 a day for every day their filings and campaign finance reports are late. The problem is, under the current code and law, if they refuse to acknowledge their activities, I have no leverage with which to fine anyone. Where do I send the bill? So the third provision I'm asking the council to consider would require, when those political committees are formed and registered, that they would have to file exactly the same campaign finance reports that candidates have to file when they're running for office. And we would hold those persons who sign up as the leaders, sponsors, agents, representatives of those political committees individually, severally, and personally liable for any fines that have to be collected. Now, in the next breath, I have to say, I'm not about fining people. That's the last thing I want. And the code very clearly says the clerk shall fine the late filers $50 a day. In the very next line in the code, Jerry will correct me if I'm wrong because he always does, it says the clerk has the discretion to forgive those fines. All I'm trying to do here is the following. Who are the people advocating for what? What is their position, and who is funding them? Where's their money coming from? I got to tell you that for me, it's about transparency, fairness, and impartiality. I could talk for days about this, but I'm going to wait until you ask me questions.
Well, let's start that questioning, and thank you for your remarks with Councilor Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for the presentation, both Mr. Dahl. Thank you. I am supportive of this. I unfortunately was sort of in the middle of it, and I just wanted to share the experience of with another candidate that had a committee that was supporting that there could be no reporting on. And so, as you all know, in running, we have to report where we're spending our money and where we're getting our money. And those are very specific reports that have to be filed, every month during an election. And it was a very frustrating process to find that while as candidates we had to report, but these committees or groups do not have to report, nor do they have to say where their finances are going, nor do they have to have any people listed as contacts. To me, this is very similar to larger campaign finance reform we see federally in this country in terms of how political action committees are funded and how that's reported. And this, to me, is following suit of people being able to be able to follow the money, basically, in any campaign, large or small. So that's why I would support this. Thanks.
Councillor Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. And along with the memo from Mr. Kirkpatrick, there were two memos from our city attorney's office, and in those they're very specific, and they cite their sources, which is what I tell my children to do when they're trying to tell me something. TikTok is not a credible source. Cite your sources. And so I just wanted to just clarify. Well, first off, I want to say that this has come up before from other city councilors, and so this is not a one action, a one-time meeting on one action. This information has been requested before from city council, from past city councilors that I've sat with. And so I just want to just clarify, because, it is several pages of legal speak and notations. What the city clerk is asking for is that when there are two or more electors, registered voters, that ask the office to approve or initiate a referendum petition, that they be required simultaneously to file for a type of political committee. Two, if there's two or more persons engaged in public acts as defined in current law, which in the memo dated April 19th from the city attorney, they said that to make sure that public action is clearly defined, and that constitutional provisions that follow the general theme of advice, which is in two types of activity, both should be speech and financial activity. So that's the second ask. And then the third ask is that we give the city clerk the authority to apply the fines if found necessary, if said paperwork is not turned in. And is that clear? Yes. Also, part of that ask is to mitigate risk, as the city attorney's office said. The concept would be to narrowly tailor an ordinance to the legitimate purpose of campaign finance transparency, recommending setting a threshold aggregate dollar amount on which the committee must register. So upon reaching X number of dollars. In comparison, in Aurora Municipal Code, committees to register upon raising or spending $1,000 during an election cycle, or political committees, those affiliated with specific candidates, must register upon raising or spending $400 per election cycle. And so my suggestion as we move forward into our consensus is that we come up with a dollar amount, and if it's, follow along with the Aurora Municipal Code. Of course, we are a much smaller community, so, if we feel like we want that threshold to be smaller, but that's something to consider while we're considering what we want our consensus to be.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Ohm next, and then Councillor Stites.
Thank you, Mayor. One question I have is, what do we do about if somebody decides to, create a website and use social media, and that's all they do? And I'm for what's being proposed, but how does this work? Because you could be a little more anonymous by doing that.
Jerry, you want to go first?
Sure. You know, the tension that we see here really is between the sort of understandable accountability when you have candidates who have to register, you know, who they are. For lots of reasons, they are known and want to be known and need to be responsible. And you have the tension between that and all forms of First Amendment speech that, as Councilmember Ohm points out, can be just social media. I'm not organizing a committee. I just want to say a lot of things on social media. And I think you can. So the truth will be that there will be a lot of speech that is simply speech that will not be captured and shouldn't be, frankly, captured in a campaign finance and campaign reporting system that the city would put together. And that means that on the campaign side, on the candidate side, things are not very messy. Candidates know what they have to do. On the campaigning side, the First Amendment side, the other side, things are messy, and I'm alerting you to that. And I think the answer, Councilmember Ohm, to that question would be, I don't think that we would be able to, or I wouldn't recommend writing an ordinance that captures activity on social media. There's going to have to be some triggers and thresholds that are the expenditure of dollars as kind of a hard edge to be able then to require disclosure and reports. And that's really just a function of the case law. And there's some speech arenas that are always going to be completely unregulated, short of advocating some form of violence that you can, but the fire in a crowded theater, right, is the classic example. You can regulate that speech and prohibit it. Pretty much any other speech, no. I'm sorry I'm taking so long to answer, but I really want to emphasize, I guess, that there will be limits on the kind of behaviors that maybe might be unpleasant, but there will be limits on the degree to which the city can require persons articulating those views to tell you, here's how much I've spent. We will need to have triggers and thresholds as mentioned in the memo and as Councilmember Hoppe points out.
So would the litmus test kind of be, for instance, if someone's doing a paid promotional page, so they're spending money, and
Yep.
I know this is hard to find out, but would that be kind of the litmus test of like they're paying
Yeah.
money for that ad versus they just posted something?
That's a really good distinction to make. You've made the distinction in a few words better than I did in all those other words, but you put your finger on a good distinction. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
In fact, there's case law that says if an individual, one person, goes out and stands on the street corner, passes out bumper stickers, makes bullhorn announcements in favor or opposed to something, that's completely protected speech. It's when we get a group, two or more persons, spending money and engaging in campaign activity.
And remember,
It took us months to figure out whether we could even do this for that very reason.
yeah, that's correct. And let's remember, the speech is always protected.
Yes.
Right? It's the expenditure of money around the speech and the organizing activities around the speech that can be required to be reported. But the speech, what you say, whether you say it as a group or individually, is always protected up to that extreme fire in a crowded theater example I gave. Other
Thank you.
questions?
Thank you. Councilor Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been a part of a lot of elections in the city of Wheat Ridge going back to when I was a baby. And as Ms. Hoppe said, this is not the first time this has come up. This iteration of this group isn't even the first iteration of this group. It's been around for 20 years or 30 years or so. My dad and grandfather used to tell me stories about it all the time. But in fact, the yellow sheet that Amanda had against her, that's the classic Wheat Ridge thing. Comes out about a week and a half before the election, and it's kind of a fun historical thing. But depending on which side you're on, right? But it doesn't leave a whole lot for accountability. And I think what I really appreciate is, number one on this, that committees that are looking to circulate petitions for referendums need to register, because we've had citizens come in. I can recall during the Lutheran, or the Lutheran vote a couple months ago, we had a woman come in and claim that she passed a petition to stop 32nd and Kipling. So she went around to all of her neighbors, got signatures. What she was really stopping was 38th and Johnson. So I think it's important that these people are held accountable to what they're saying to our citizens. Yes, you've got the right to say whatever you want, but when you organize as a group and act like an expert on the situation, you need to be held accountable for what you're saying. So to Ms. Hoppy's point, I think the number as far as the financial is about $400, because I think Aurora at 1,000 is a much bigger, so I think about $400 seems to make sense to me. And I think we can go from there. So thank you for your hard work, both Jerry and Steve, on this, because it's an issue, and it's becoming a bigger issue as we go forward. So thank you.
I don't know whether you know it or not, but this council and staff have already got a plan to build housing for 10,000 people at the Lutheran Legacy campus. That is the latest rumor that somebody is circulating. Think about what it would require to put 10,000 housing units in a 10-acre plot.
Councillor Nosler-Beck.
So I just wanted to throw out a couple of things. A lot of what we're talking about tonight is what I do for a day job, and so I just wanted to kind of give some rules of thumb that we use a lot of times. So anytime a candidate or a committee is using funds to communicate or whatever it might be, that's when you need to, put the paid for by, whatever it may be, and you list your registered agent there. So for example, on a website, that would be in the bottom part, but where the copyright is. And so if you're a registered political, if you're basically a committee, then you would list that on a website because you're paying for that. Or it's that organized communication that is funded and registered. And then the other piece of that, where you really draw the line on social media, you treat that, if you're paying for advertising or if you're speaking on behalf of the organization, that's where you have to say, I'm speaking on behalf of this organization. But if you got on your personal Facebook page and agreed with everything or shared the post from whatever the committee may be, that's okay. You don't have to say this was paid for by that piece. So those are just some rules of thumb on that, but it all comes down to the money and who's paying for it. And then I just wanted to also say that I actually really agree with that $400 level. It's also where we hit a threshold with a lot of our statewide races. It's $400 is when you start to have to register with the Secretary of State's office. And the less that we can make this about individual cases, but make this the way things go, and kind of lean on other municipalities or the Secretary of State's office as just kind of how that works. I just highly recommend that, because we will have lots of questions about this moving forward, because it isn't how the city's operated. And then my last point that I just wanted to make is that we've had a lot of examples of how this can, be to attack or be for negative campaigning, but it's also an opportunity for the community to get behind and support issues they really care about, and fund some of that work so that it could be a well-funded ballot initiative that the community brings to the table that isn't always just brought by council and stuff too. So it's not always for bad. So just throwing out a few of those points.
Thank you. Counselor Dozeman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, reading through this memo, and thank you for including some of the examples, and I don't know who would be speaking to this, but for those watching and listening, could you kind of give an example or a summary of some of our neighboring municipalities and how they address this, if at all?
Well, you have a number of examples in the memo, you're right, and different municipalities have also for people listening, for example, Aurora has a $1,000 cutoff per election cycle. I guess I would say what we would want to do if council approves a consensus would be to really get almost do a little grid of what numbers we see out there, but per council member Nasser Beck's point, really try to, as much as we can, track triggers and thresholds that we see, not only for other cities, but who are useful, the Secretary of State's office, because there's going to be protection in numbers here. To the extent there are challenges, you really want to make sure that you're similar as much as you can to numbers that have been upheld, and there's been a fair amount of litigation, as you see, challenging the thresholds there. So what you're hearing from me is a reluctance, frankly, to say this number is the right one, and it's absolutely what ought to go in the ordinance, and we're good on this. What I really think would be our obligation if you do the consensus is to confirm what numbers we think are safe and to include those. And I have heard from you clearly that, $400 might make more sense for Wheat Ridge than the larger number in Aurora. I'm not sure necessarily it is as related to population after a certain level. But the real strong point I guess I want to make is that if council agrees with the consensus, then the next step for us is really multiplying the legal research we've done around what cases have succeeded and what have failed, so that when we come to you with a number, we're more confident of it, rather than me telling you, okay, here's the number tonight and we're good, because I'm not comfortable doing that.
Counselor Dozeman, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. So with that said, this would be coming back to a study session for us to discuss further, because I'm comfortable moving forward with this, but I definitely want some more information before deciding one way or another to move forward of voting on this matter.
May I comment that that's exactly the thinking that we've been engaged in, because there are so many moving parts and so many things to consider in drafting these ordinances that I brought it to council now so that we would bring you something back in the fall at the earliest. First of all, our newest attorney will pass the bar exam and start to work on this with us, since he's the one who has done all this spade work. But there are a lot of detailed questions. What we're trying to do here is get a sense, is council willing to consider something after further detailed analysis of what we're doing?
Thank you. I have Counselor Hoppy and then Counselor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. One last question for Mr. Dahl. I'm looking at where it talks about Lakewood, and it said they donated, if you donated more than $250, it was found to be overbroad and unconstitutional, and you had to disclose your name, address, and phone number. And I'm wondering why that was found to be overbroad, unconstitutional, in comparison to when anybody in the public comes to the podium, they do have to disclose their full name and address, but not their phone number. I'm just looking for something parallel, I guess.
I think probably, and I'd have to read that case again, but probably the issue is to to what extent are you sort of chilling the speech of a person by asking for that much information from them? And the more information you ask in order to permit someone to, have speech, the more the courts really look askance at that. I get it that when people come to the podium, we ask for name, address, not phone number, but that's kind of a convenience. And you'll recall that when people come to the podium and say, I'm not really comfortable giving my phone number, giving my address, you still take that comment. So the goal here, I think, is to be able to get enough information to have a regulation that is effective, but not any more than that, such that it chills free speech, right? And so I think in the case you describe, I think the additional information was considered to be maybe more than needed to accomplish the regulatory purpose. And because it was more than needed, it was unnecessarily chilling of free speech, which is this tension that I mentioned earlier that we're constantly under. That's my answer to that. Each of these cases is kind of decided on its own facts, and it's hard to take one and generalize it to what our rule should be. So my goal here, if the consensus is made, will be to look at a lot of cases and have Nick at our firm and Carmen look at a lot of cases and come to a level of comfort about how far along the disclosure range we can comfortably go to achieve, again, our regulatory purpose. And are we really just getting extra information we don't need to achieve the regulatory purpose? That's got to be the pole star for us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have Councilor Hoppy with her hand up as sort of chronologically next. I have also Councilor Weaver and Councilor Nosler Beck. Did you wish to defer or?
I was going to ask for a consensus, so if you guys want to ask questions.
Let me go with Councilor Weaver.
Okay. This is more a clarification question. The flyer that went out, which I thought was interesting, and I just have a question for Mr. Dahl. It had a statement of who this organization was, but it had no contact information. There was no website. And I was just curious if that is anywhere when you get a flyer in your mailbox or on your door, is that all free speech as well, or where does that fall? I'm just curious.
Yeah. Denver, I think, successfully has required that a disclosure on campaign materials be made, as Councilmember Nosler-Beck points out, that you disclose who it was, because and if it isn't, and you can locate who it is that's doing these campaign materials without disclosing, then when we get to the enforcement section, which we're going to need to rewrite in the city's code, then you can enforce. I had a conversation with the Denver City Attorney's Office some time ago when I was looking at sign code issues, and because they require disclosure on campaign signs and yard signs. And I said, how can you do that? Isn't that content-related regulation under that recent Supreme Court case? And their answer was they saw that as a campaign regulation, not a sign code regulation, and they were able to do it. So my answer to you is that, yes, I think we can require this on these materials, and if it isn't on those materials, then we're into enforcement land. And clearly, there will be people that will put stuff out without that on their materials. And if it's from a campaign committee that needs to have registered that, then we'll have an enforcement tool, which I would hope. We haven't talked about this much, but the present structure of Section 7.5, which will need to be revised, relies heavily, and it will continue to rely heavily on encouraging people when they're told, there's this thing out there that you needed to have done this with, and giving people the opportunity to correct the problem. Because very often it's not being done with an aim to violate the law. It's just being done because it's speech. And then I can have speech, can I? And there's really no restrictions on it, and a lot of times there aren't. So I want to emphasize that compliance and working with the public and educating them about what's required and what isn't, it should be a major feature of what the city does here as it amends these codes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Councilor Noslerek.
This is probably something to just include in what we ask for the staff to come back with for the study session. But in regards to the how we're reporting funds, it's really important in the day and age that we're in now, where people are Venmoing and some are paying in cash, some are still using checks, that we're very clear in how, you know, money is received, because it becomes really difficult with cash to document how much and who that's attributed to. And so that's one of the reasons also that a lot of information is collected, is so that if you are paying in cash, we know how many actual dollar bills were given over. And so this is going to be a big study session when we decide to dive into this. But that's an important piece of it. And just if, you know, Lakewood having to report at 250 and it hitting kind of a threshold, if we were going off of Secretary of State, you have to report over $20, and then you have to report employer after $100. And the reason behind that is more so that if there are special interests funding your campaign, it's usually because it's who you're, it's deciphering who you're employed by. And so those are just some of the ticky-tacky there, but just to include if we're going to go there, because we have very broad regulations right now on this, we're gonna go that deep if we're gonna make these if we're gonna make this policy. So I warned you, is what I'm saying.
Is that a fair warning? Okay. Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask for consensus to direct the city attorney's office to move forward with the suggested changes and bring back to city council for another study session, more information regarding the public action being clearly defined, the X amount of dollars, that is the trigger amount of dollars, and the potential of how digital media, websites, and Facebook posts that are paid for, how those are monitored, and how the money is contributed.
Might I suggest adding to that, Councilmember Hoppy, if you're comfortable with it, with respect to the three specific categories of
With respect to the
ordinance change.
three specific suggested changes from the memo under 2A, B, and C.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we have consensus on that to move forward. Does that answer the kind of the questions that you all were looking to, the direction you were looking to get?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I appreciate the support and help, and I will work with the city attorney's office and otherwise fade into the background on this until it's time to enforce it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we will go to agenda item number 3. This is a strategic plan update. Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Mayor Pro Tem asked to bring forward a brief update on Council's strategic plan. Unfortunately, she is not here this evening, but hopefully maybe she's listening. But not only to do just a quick update, but also to kind of tee up the conversation about our next retreat. The last retreat was in February of 2021. We usually do them about every 2 years. And so the end of the year, we'll be here before we know it. It's coming up. So we don't have to make any decisions tonight on that, but just want you to start thinking about it. If you have any thoughts or ideas tonight on what you would like to see at the next retreat, we can talk about that. But is everything okay? Did we lose somebody? I think it's fine. I think Jerry was just logging off. Okay, so I have Marianne and Allie here this evening. They're gonna help with some of these updates, but again, we're just gonna go very brief. These were we provide updates in the manager's update that you get quarterly. So not a lot has changed since the last manager's update, but a lot has been accomplished, I think, on our 8 priorities. So we're gonna start off with the first one, which is under Allie Scheck's purview. So Allie.
Thank you, Mr. Goff. Good evening. Allie Scheck, Admin Services Director. Lots happening right now with your priority number 1, new efforts of engagement in government and understanding city processes. So we had this conversation more than a year ago now. I think it was May 3rd of 2021 when we kind of talked about some ideas for this priority. But the thing I want to focus on really wasn't planned, and that was a communications reorganization here at Wheat Ridge that I think you will, if you haven't already, start to really notice moving us in a little bit of a different direction. And that is peeling off or sort of creating a separate position in the police department. So it became pretty evident to us that there's a real need for a focused PIO in PD. You know, things have really changed in that department, expectations regarding communication. And if you think about what's been happening since George Floyd in particular, and sort of that increased demand for transparency and real dialogue with the community, I really came to learn that we all love Sarah. Sarah did an incredible job, but Sarah was working 24/7, and that's just unacceptable. And it became pretty clear that we would never post that position the way it was if Sarah were to leave, and that was not the plan at the time. But we ended up creating, when we had a vacancy, we created a PD PIO. And you didn't ask for that, but what you did ask for was a more, really getting the community involved and really helping the community engage with us. And with all the work that was needed and very necessary in PD, we weren't going to be able to accomplish that with the current staffing. So making this decision has really helped. We are now, with Sarah, as sad as that is, it's always an opportunity when someone leaves to kind of reconsider what the position should be. So with carving out PD, we were able to refocus. We need a different skill set. We don't need a PIO now for the city. We need a communication and engagement manager. That's what Wheat Ridge needs. We need to be focused on telling our story, helping the residents tell their story. And I cannot even tell you how excited I am about the candidates that we have in the mix that I think will be able to really take us to that next level. So again, I think just that little bit of that reorganization will help. So sorry, I don't mean to be long-winded. So I wanted to start with that. And so thanks for your patience as we recruit and train. And again, so thankful for Sarah. This has got nothing to do with Sarah other than just love and honor and respect her, but really just getting us to a different place with not needing that traditional PIO skill set in the main city role. You recall we talked about a video series around demystifying Wheat Ridge government. This is Sarah's work, and the good news is the first video is we've seen a first draft of it, and it's using time-lapsed graphic illustrations to really bring these concepts to life. So in the next few weeks, that will roll out, and then when the new communications and engagement manager gets here, they'll get working on the rest of the videos in the series. So stay tuned for that. The next few weeks, you'll see the first one, which is actually on engagement. And getting involved and staying informed. So we started there. We've got a little website refresh project underway. I hate to call this a redesign. It's not a redesign. It's taking a hard look at our homepage, our navigation, and using data and analytics to drive what our navigation should actually look like. So in fact, we've got meetings the next 3 days on that particular project. So that's coming together.
I have a question regarding our website. So we have an app, but it doesn't really, I don't know, it's kind of clunky. Would like updating the app or getting the app to kind of work with the website better, would that be a part of that refresh for the website?
Actually, yeah, Civic Plus just asked us if we want to do that as part of this, and we've said, yes, we do.
Yay, I love our app.
Yep.
Thank you.
There's the app. Yep, there is an app. Actually, it gets really good usage. I was surprised between Apple and Droid. Yep. We've had, for the last 2 editions, a full-page graphic dedicated in connections, dedicated to explaining how to connect, stay informed, and engage with us. We'll continue that. Maybe not, we won't necessarily have the full page. This edition is going to be packed full of Carnation Festival information. So I know Councillor Dozeman's very disappointed with that. You all approved an ordinance expanding notification requirements. That was, I think, last summer when that happened. If you recall, one of the projects under this priority is to develop a real-time development map where members of the public can see perhaps something happening on a lot, click, go home or on their phone, sort of click on that area on a map, and it will pull up information about what's happening. Early work has started on that, but we've just, in mid-June, we'll be onboarding our new GIS technician. His name is Sam. He comes with some great experience and is really ready to get started. So we're super excited about that. And then something that we talked about at the study session last May was an onboarding toolkit for you all and for other volunteers. That's not something that we've started to tackle yet, but we will. So that'll be something later in the year. And that, the goal there is to help boards and commissions members, counselors, folks that are already engaged with us, help them learn how to advocate to their neighbors, how to get involved. So that's still to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on that one quick before we go to the next? Oh, all kinds.
Councillor Noslerback.
I just wanted to say that I'm so excited about the community engagement and communications professional that you're going to be hiring. That's really, I think, where things have headed in terms of what really strategic communications are all about. It's that last little piece of how are we connecting that message and the work that we're doing with the community. And so that's been my job title before, and it's just an incredible job. So I'm excited that that's what we have to offer out there, and I'm really excited to get to know who we end up bringing on board.
I know, it's a really fun job. It's going to be a great job.
And I saw another hand. Good. Councillor Hoppy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask real fast, as part of this, I feel like it's really hard sometimes to be engaged in what's happening when it's really hard to find the information in our old files. And so, oftentimes, if you don't have the date right, or, sometimes it's 01, 01, 00, or it's 1/1/2000, or, so is there any kind of thought around trying to kind of standardize our kind of what's going into our archives so that it's easier to find? It's the archives is really hard to navigate.
Councillor Hoppy, are you, if I may ask, you thinking about, minutes, minutes, old agendas, things like that?
And are you talking Laserfish or on the website, or both? Laserfish is, you can link to it on the website.
You get a link to it from the website, yeah. And it's still kind of hard to find, even it's just, even sometimes even keywords don't pull up what you need if you don't know an exact date. And sometimes even if you know the exact date, you have to put it in 3 or 4 different ways to get what you need. And so I don't know, I know that's a lot of, the Laserfish stuff is a lot of old labeled stuff, and I don't know if there's a program out there that you can be like, select these files and make them all rename themselves the same way, or anything like that.
Thank you. This is a big can of worms, Laserfish, for sure. So thanks for understanding that. It is difficult. I'll dig into this a little bit more. I do know that we are due for a Laserfish upgrade. You might recall that we've put this off the last couple of years just with, budget instability or not sure about, the pandemic. This is something I can have the IT team look into whether or not we are a little hamstrung right now by the version that we're using. If there's anything that we can do there to help. I agree, it is not particularly user-friendly, although we went on an educational kick with the city clerk. Remember, Mr. City Clerk, not too long ago, we talked about the overwhelming amount of Cora requests that we were getting that really weren't Cora requests. They were just people not knowing where to find information that's already public. And so we did some education around it, and I know that we think that decreased the number. We redid our page on public records on the website to make it a little more streamlined. So I think we've made some progress there, but I agree, it's still challenging to find exactly what you're looking for in the archives.
Great, well, I will look at the new instructions and follow those.
Thank you.
Thank you. One more question right here from Noslerbeck.
One point to make is just that Counselor Hoppy kept looking at me because I always am like, can you help me find this? But
So we should get Counselor Noslerbeck some individual training.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's what she was actually saying. No, but I just think that a lot of the public who are using this, and then also us on council as well, we're just used to being able to do like a keyword search type of thing, or we're using Google Drive and how things are labeled. I understand how hard it is to name things, but if there is an upgrade that's available, it would be so great if it was a keyword search, or if we just even knew where to start, we could kind of train folks from there. Anyway, thank you.
Well, a lot of the upgrades that we're looking at on the navigation part of the website is to make sure that we're thinking, we're taking off our government hats and making sure that we're thinking about the average Joe out there, right? And what would they think about when they're trying to find something? As an example, we list a lot of things by department, and that makes sense to us. That doesn't make sense to most people out there. So that's what you're going to see in the navigation changes, which may help also.
Okay, thank you.
The next item is bulk plane. And we had several study sessions on this over the last couple of years, but just very recently, on May 16th, City Council gave direction for staff to bring back an ordinance on this. So we have, I think, the second reading, public hearing is scheduled for August 8th of this year. Any questions on that one? Great. Item 3 is re-examining advancing sidewalks on 38th Avenue. Just had a discussion this evening on the west portion. So hopefully you don't have any more questions about that right now. We'll bring that back once we get a contract, which is great. And the east, I guess we're going to call it East 38th Avenue Street section. We're hoping to bring back in, let's see, I think the first quarter of next year. We hope to bring that back. We are getting, hopefully even sooner if we can, but workload right now looks like we may not be able to have a good discussion about it until first quarter of next year. But as you know, we are moving forward on the green, final design on the green. We are getting, I think, a lot of interest in 38th and hearing out there. When are we going to finalize that? So I think there's a lot of support out there for doing something. So excited to bring that back as soon as we can. Any questions on that? The next item is reviewing the vision, mission, and funding of local works. We had a study session about this a while back and kind of went over the vision and mission of what local works is today. Kate Cook gave a good presentation on that. As you know, local works Kate left Local Works, and they hired a new, if you haven't heard, new executive director. She started today. Paige Piper is her name. She was the former executive director of Outdoor Lab, so she knows a lot about our community, and I'm going to reach out to her this week. But we are working with Local Works. We have been on reconfiguring or reallocating duties amongst local works in the city based on new priorities. I think we're at a pretty good place. We hope to we have scheduled right now for July 18th study session to bring back a plan to City Council on what their funding will look like for local works for next year. Any questions on that? Streamlining the permit processes. I will turn it back over to Ms. Scheck.
Thank you. I'll be brief. We've got lots going on in licensing, as you all know, and Megan Schmitz, our first licensing technician, joined the city a year ago, this month, actually, and has just been doing an incredible job with really upping the game on our customer service with not just the special license programs, but business licensing in general. And thank goodness, as I think you may remember, we lost Carol Crawford very suddenly. She passed away last summer, right after Megan started, actually. And so Megan, we're now fully staffed on that team, but Megan's picked up a lot of that. And again, we continue to hear from businesses just what a great job that she's doing on the customer service front. Really thankful for Megan, an award winner. She was our Action Award winner. Of our Action Awards, she was the Action Award winner, which means that we have, we've seen her do all the things, kind of demonstrate.
What does action stand for?
Okay, action. Ready? Around the table. Accountability.
Change.
Integrity.
Opportunity.
Now.
Now.
We didn't make you all do it. Okay. She's fantastic. Oh, you do all have it, yeah. Thank you to the mayor for joining that ceremony. That was fun. Last August, you all approved changes to Chapter 22 of our code about taxation. And that was great. That allowed us to join SUTS, the Sales and Use Tax Simplification System, with the state. And what's wonderful about that is that businesses that file in multiple jurisdictions in Colorado, and there are a lot of them, can now do that through the state once a month and pay the state and all of the jurisdictions at once. And then we get a deposit each day that there is a deposit for us from the state. And that's going really well, and we're just getting more and more business joining and enjoying sort of the simplification of it, which was their point to start with. So it's actually been faster adoption than certainly we imagined. But let's talk about the thing I think you really asked us to do, which is improve and streamline permitting processes. As you know, you all approved the launch of our ERP, our ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning, an analysis of our ERP. We kicked that off in January. We've had about 100 different staff members involved in this. It's a huge lift. We've completed dozens of meetings to dig into what we currently have and what we as a city want. And I have to tell you, I am surprised at how much our current system has been hamstringing us and the staff, because we've learned that information is really siloed. So while we might be using one system in licensing and permitting, there are different functions, and staff can't see between the functions in our current program. So somebody who's up in planning and zoning cannot see what's happening in licensing for the same case in the same business. So where that has been affecting our businesses is that there's an assumption that we're talking to each other. And luckily we're small enough that staff can physically talk to each other here in Wheat Ridge, but they're not able to track the data. They're not able to track the cases. So we're working on that really hard. We're finalizing the RFP. The RFP will go out this summer. We're on track to bring you all a recommendation in the fall for a new system or systems in order to help us really modernize. So I think one of the things that we wanted to accomplish in this priority is better education to our businesses about the process. We haven't started, I don't think that's true. I think that Mr. Art in particular has really upped his game in sort of being that city concierge. We continue to hear from businesses that work directly with Steve in order to dig in and find out where something is, maybe if something's hung up, or how to go about starting the process. But what we haven't done yet is the work to create the new educational materials. We can do that But I advise against it today. I think we're better off finishing this process that we're in the middle of right now with the ERP and then doing that work. A big part of the implementation is the change management, and that's still to come. And that's what's really going to help us figure out where the choke points are. And it's not all to do with technology, but a lot of it's to do with the technology. So my recommendation is that we just hold off just a little bit until we know what system we're going with, and then we reimagine what that flow chart looks like, and we build that educational component. We'll still work on the video. We'll still work on some of the other pieces. We're doing more in connections. Like I said, I hear Mr. Art, constantly talking to businesses. They're about to do the business walk where they go to, I think it's 125 businesses on foot with volunteers, and they've got resource guides ready to go. So it's, I think that we're definitely upping our game there, but I think the real work will come in next year. Thank you.
Great, and with the ERP system, we've been saving money, so in our equipment replacement fund. So hopefully by the time we get ready to buy something, we'll have money put away for that use. Any questions on that item? The next item is commercial corridor code review. This item we hope to bring back at the fourth quarter of this year to get some further direction from City Council. There wasn't a lot of direction when this came up in the retreat, but I think the general discussion was some of our commercial corridors are just looking a little tired maybe. What can we do as a city to help, both I think in front and behind the curb? And I've been talking to a few of you, getting some ideas. And one concept that we're looking at is, all of our commercial corridors are not within an urban renewal area. There's a lot of resources in urban renewal areas to help out those commercial corridors. So I think we need to take a very holistic look at all of our corridors in the community that have some commercial aspect to them and figure out if they don't have urban renewal as resources, what kind of resources can we give to those corridors also? So that's one thing that we're looking at, and hopefully we'll bring this back fourth quarter and get some more direction. So keep thinking about that on what you think's missing in the city, what ideas you might have on commercial corridors, what you'd like to see, and we can talk more about that. Questions on that, Janice?
Councilor Hoppy.
Sorry.
Thank you.
It's okay.
Patrick, are we still doing the, it was like the TLC neighborhoods? Are we still doing, it was like I can't remember the name of it, but it was like TLC. But
TLC,
it was,
yes.
It was the commercial piece, like the.
Yeah, we chose commercial corridors every year.
Yeah, are we still doing that?
I think they were delayed a little bit during COVID. We still have the TLC program. We would pick 2 residential neighborhoods and 2 commercial corridors every year, or at least 1 commercial corridor, and do a really engaged effort going out into those neighborhoods, educating them, talking to them, listening to them, hearing. We coordinated with dumpster days, educate them about code enforcement, and then kind of warn them that these are things we look at, and then give them some time, and then let them know that we're going to be coming back in these neighborhoods and doing efforts to clean them up. So we still do those. We still have money in the budget. We've increased those budgets to allow for more dumpsters for those programs. I don't know if we have a specific commercial corridor that we're focusing on right now, but we can if that's something council wants us to do.
Thank you.
The next item is policy on non-conforming accessory dwelling units. Again, we've had numerous conversations about this, and very recently, again, we received direction from City Council, and we are scheduled to have a public hearing on this on July 11th for final ordinance. So great progress on that one. Thank you for your help on that one. And then homelessness, a big one. Marianne has patiently waited all night. Thank you for staying, Marianne. There's a lot here, so we wanted to make sure she's here to give an update and see if you have any questions.
Yeah, thank you. Marianne Schilling, assistant to the city manager. I think we've seen you recently, so you're fairly up to date on what we've been doing, but just a lot of really great work. As you can see in the report, Rebecca Radaba, our homeless navigator, has worked with over 120 clients, and she started just about a year and a half ago. And you can see that she's housed almost 40 individuals into permanent or transitional housing, which I think really just puts our jobs in perspective. She's, we work very hard, but Rebecca's changing lives. And she's doing a really great job. I constantly get, kudos from her. Just this week, I got one from Sergeant Dawkins, from one of the residents of our faith-based community, who said that she was an angel. I was with her the other day, and she got a text from a client who said that she was the grooviest. So that's pretty big.
So the
she's
grooviest
doing-
angel.
The grooviest angel. So she's doing really great, and even just, I hear from other navigators and their countywide navigation program. She has a lot of experience with our homeless management information system, HMIS, and so she's the one who's really helping out the other navigators who learn to utilize that tool. So it's really, really great work from her. And so you also remember that on April 4th, we came to you with the idea of going with a housing navigator to take some of the load off of her plate. Happy to share that we have a contingent offer that was accepted this afternoon. So breaking news. So as long as everything goes well, we'll have a housing navigator to be able to help Rebecca and just really hopefully try to double the impact that we have and continue to do all the great work that we're doing here in Wheat Ridge. Additionally, we talked to you just a couple weeks ago about the agreement with Family Tree to work and to help get some of our residents who are staying in our hotels into stable housing. So we've been working really hard on them. I think, Patrick, you sent them you said you've seen the flyer that we're using to collect all the information to see what they need, what type of services everyone. So right now we're like in the information gathering phase, and Family Tree is doing a really great job with that. Additionally, we're planning kind of like an information session, likely at Fruitdale Park later this summer, for people to come and just sort of like come up and talk to Family Tree and learn about it. So it's not just that they have to fill out the form, they have the opportunity to speak and learn about it. And we'll also have Rebecca and hopefully, maybe, the housing navigator as well, to be there for anybody who happens to be around who isn't staying in a hotel but is also wanting to get involved in our homeless navigation program. So a lot of really great work there. And then, continuing to work on the Jefferson County Housing Navigation Center. So that is continuing to move forward. We have the Built for Zero program, which is a program where you kind of take one population at a time. And so right now they're focusing on veterans, and Rebecca's taking a leading role in that initiative. It's a big kind of almost statewide initiative that people pop on a call and they do case conferencing on specific individuals and what they can do. So they're really just like hammering specific groups at a time with the idea of getting to zero in the future. So can't speak highly enough about what the program's doing so far and all the great work that's been done. But if you have any questions, I'd love to hear it.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mary Ann. Yeah, a lot going on there. And thank you, Council, for all your support on all these items. And, our goal is to get these priorities accomplished, or at least close to fully accomplished in a 2-year period. And we're hoping to be there by February of next year. Then you can give us some more fun things to do. I know you all have a list. So we love it. I mean, this is what keeps us going, honestly. These are really interesting and challenging things to tackle, but it seems like they get more and more complicated. But I mean, what'd you say about Rebecca? Well, no, we're impacting lives too, right? We are. We're all impacting lives here. Yeah. So. Not the grooviest. I don't know if we can talk briefly about if anybody has thoughts about future retreats or just start thinking about it, and we can talk about it at some future meetings. But if anybody has anything tonight that you want to share, we'd be happy to talk about it. But, I think we're shooting for, again, end of the year, first of the year, that time frame, depending on holidays and when we can get a facilitator. And so, but love for it to be what you guys want to get out of it. So instead of just skiing. Oh, okay. Oh, you want to do that. So that's it. That's an update on our strategic plan.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mary Ann and Allie and Patrick. Great report. All right, that concludes our business items that we have on our agenda tonight. And after that, we're going to go to staff reports. Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have one item this evening. We've been asked to take the temperature of City Council. Apologize, you haven't seen this before tonight, or maybe haven't even heard about it, but hopefully you've heard a little bit about it. But so Gary Community Ventures, which is formerly the Peton Foundation, which you might be more familiar with, They are working on a ballot initiative potentially for this fall, for statewide ballot initiative. It's a legislative measure titled Dedicated State Income Tax Revenue for Affordable Housing Programs. It's number 108. I'm just going to read this so I keep it straight. But the measure is a transformative, first of its kind, comprehensive housing program designed to A, permanently fund affordable housing across the state through innovative financing, and B, creative incentives for local governments to achieve meaningful growth in affordable housing within their communities. The program unlocks $300 million in annual funding for affordable housing, which by 2040 is expected to result in $5 billion in total capital to preserve affordable housing and create in the state of Colorado. This would result in an estimated 10,000 new affordable units annually and 170,000 by 2040, eliminating the affordability gap in the state and serving as a model for the country. The measure creates a permanent, sustained revenue source by dedicating 0.1% of federal taxable income to an affordable housing fund, and then that affordable housing fund would also be debruced, which means it would not be, it would not have the TABOR limits. So essentially, what it would do is it would reduce the amount of TABOR rebates that we all receive from the state. They're projected to have to do TABOR rebates for many, many years just because of TABOR. So it would reduce, it's not a new tax, it's a reduction in the TABOR revenue rebates that we all receive. So Colorado is currently projected to provide more than $4 billion in tax refunds over the next 3 years in TABOR refunds. So this money would just come from that. Again, it would effectively recapture $300 million per year of those refunds. The monies would be used roughly 10% for land banking to create statewide land banking fund, 40% to deed restrict rental housing that would be permanently affordable, 15% of the funds for home ownership program to launch a down payment assistance program, 20% for homelessness and supportive housing programs. The two caveats to this, if a local government wants to participate and receive any of these revenues, they have to commit to a 3% annual increase in affordable housing, and they have to implement a 90-day fast-track process to approve new affordable housing projects within their jurisdiction. I'm not sure if that's possible, and I think most communities, this was discussed at the Borden County's Board of County Commissioners breakfast. Scott, you were, I think, on that call this last week. So those things still might be up for discussion, but I'm not sure if we could meet that 90-day fast track. But Community First Foundation is looking to potentially support this, and they want to know if there's political support throughout Jefferson County or the state. Would there be political support for this type of ballot question? I know that's a lot to throw out to you, and I don't expect a yes or no, but it's just kind of taking the temperature if this is something that you would say hell no to, or that this might be something that you would support.
Councilman Oslerbeck.
I'm of course in support of all of the things that this money could potentially go towards. That sounds amazing. The one thing that I just, and maybe you know the answer to this, or maybe we need to check on it, is just, is this potentially standing up like yet another kind of housing board or something? Like how are the funds distributed? Do we know that? Is it through Department of Local Affairs? Is it feeding into an existing?
Chaffa is really one of the main players in this.
Okay.
So they become sort of the agency that kind of helps distribute the money, sort of along the LIHTC lines, low income tax credit funding mechanism.
And so is that governor appointed or?
Chaffa is, I believe, isn't it, government? I don't know 100%. I think it is, though. Seems right. Not 100% sure on that.
Okay. I probably want to, before I'm totally on board with it, I'd like to better understand that a little more, just because like I said, I'm in full support of all of those things. And if Wheat Ridge could get ourselves to a place where we could qualify for those funds. That sounds like some funds that we really need, but my concern is that the funding for housing, we already have quite a few of those mechanisms in place already, and I just want to make sure that this isn't adding another layer of bureaucracy to a really challenging system already. So I just want to dive a little deeper on it before I'm ready to say, let's go.
Patrick, I just sent you some information that I had, including the ballot language and a draft resolution and a 4-page overview and a PowerPoint. Some more information on that, and you may want to be able to forward that.
Yeah,
to
we can forward all that
councilors.
to City Council. So again, no obligations for you to make any decisions tonight, but I think Community First Foundation was going to go to their board, I think this week, to get, to see if they could get direction to support this, because they have to, obviously, will have to get signatures to get this on the ballot, and they, don't want to spend a lot of money if they don't think there's political support in the state. So, okay, that's all I got. Oh, Jude.
Councilor Hutchinson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Is this something to where developers would be needing to build so many affordable housing units? Like Denver is trying to get developers on board, a certain percentage of what they build would be affordable housing.
Well, they're saying, so in their literature, which I'll send out again, they're saying why this is so important, this initiative, is because a lot of cities across the country, they're either focused on local zoning to require this as mandates, or they're also doing a mandated affordable housing with the developers, requiring them to build a certain amount. But the problem is there's no money to do any of it, so this is kind of the missing piece, is what they're saying, that we need the money. Cities can pass all zoning laws they want, but if there's no money to build the stuff, it's not going to happen. That's the whole point, that this is the missing piece in our affordable housing problem. We have no money to build product. That's what they're saying. I'm not saying that's my opinion, but that's what they're saying.
It's really to develop a funding mechanism to be able to provide on an ongoing basis funding for affordable housing, both in terms of low-interest loans and grants. Councilor Hoppy? Nope, you could, okay. You're still on.
I'm done. I think that's it.
Oh,
Mary Ann or Ally, you got
okay.
anything for the group?
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Elected officials matters. Any, Mr. Clerk, because you're behind me, I'll go to you first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Primary election ballots dropped today into the mail. You all know that. The one thing I want to mention that some of our residents may be confused about, if you are registered as an independent, as an unaffiliated voter, you will get a Democratic ballot and a Republican ballot in the mail. You may only return one or the other, not both. So you have to choose which primary you're going to vote in. The deadline is June 28th. Val, I got that date and time right, 7 p.m., June 28th. And the usual drop-off locations, the usual drop-off locations in front of City Hall, Anderson Park, the rec center, they're all available. Thank you.
Thank you. Raise your hand if you have something to offer. Mr. Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. In regarding general and taxes and affordable housing, one idea I kind of had is when I've talked to some of the constituents, they're having some real troubles with companies making cash offers and getting outbid. And so as I was looking at an idea of like, how could we possibly curb this, and I Googled it, I was made aware that California has done something very creative. Their incentive is they want people to stay in their community. And so what they're doing is they're proposing a 25% tax for people that sell their house within 3 years. And there's exclusions, you know, veterans, first-time home buyers. But the purpose of this is to kind of cool off that housing market. And then they take that tax, and that goes into an affordable housing. And there's a tier. It's a very interesting, in case anybody is interested, it's Assembly Bill 1771. But I thought that was kind of interesting like I said, the idea was to stop these companies, because I've seen it where the companies, you know, they buy a house, they sell it within a couple of months, and now they just jacked up the price. And the people that really want to be a part of this community can no longer afford to be in the community. And so that's what this bill was trying to do. It was a very interesting idea that someone's done a lot of work. So that's just my thought on that. The second, and then I did have one question, totally unrelated. The branches and everything that's piling up and getting drier in Anderson Park, and as we're getting towards 4th of July, what is the status of those piles?
They will, yeah, they're very large. I saw them this weekend. They'll be chipped as soon as we can, probably, hopefully this next week, or this week. I think, unfortunately, we received a lot more than we thought, and some of the piles got contaminated with other things, so it's not as easy just to run them through our chippers. So I think we're going to have to hire some additional resources for that, but I think we should start that, hopefully. Thankfully, it rained again today, so hopefully that's keeping the fire danger down, but we'll get to it very quickly here. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a visual aid because Ms. Weaver is really awesome. Coming up on June 18th from 9 to 11, District 3 is having our next district meeting, so hopefully you'll see these little signs up in some of the local businesses and restaurants. This is going to be at the Clear Creek Apartments, and I got to meet with Cherry, who's one of the managers over there. She's phenomenal. She's really excited about being a part of the community, and she wants to get all of their residents involved in everything that's going on there. So the additional thing is we have this little postcard coming out that has both of our District 3 meetings coming up. The June 18th is on there, and then the September 17th, which is going to be our, I guess, traditional now, dumpster day. So we're going to do a District 3 meeting as well as a dumpster day. So the students, it's a new tradition, but it's becoming a thing now. So residents of District 3 should see a little postcard here in the mail this week, hopefully, and we look forward to seeing everybody at the Clear Creek Apartments on the 18th.
Is that the event where the representatives from council dumpster dive on dumpster days?
I don't know if I was in the dumpster last year, like putting all this stuff in there. Me and Patrick and lots of members, we had a lot of fun. So we're looking forward to both of those events. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Continue.
Were you done, Mr. Seitz? Okay. Besides that fun District 3 thing that's happening, I just had a question for Mr. Goff. I've had a couple questions from constituents, and this might be helpful to others, but because we have many water districts in Wheat Ridge, I had a constituent that had a problem with a lawn company who went over her yard, broke the water tap, and now, and unfortunately, it's a constituent that you and I have already been dealing with.
Oh, yeah, okay, I was going to
This
ask.
happened to
Yep.
her again this last week. But just what does one do? And a police event, what am I trying to say? A report was made because the owner was upset that this tree company of the neighbor was coming across their yard, broke the tap. But they called me to ask, what's the process of trying to do this? Because it doesn't directly have to do with the city. A police report was made, and I was trying to sort out what they should do. And I just curious for some advice
Sure.
with people dealing with tree companies and all of those things that are happening this summer.
So is your question more about the water districts, how to work with them, or the?
The question is how, yes, but
Yeah.
So this person is dealing with the water district, but is there a mechanism either locally or at the county or at the state level where where you can get some advocacy, because it's now a situation of a neighbor, a police report, a tree company, and the water district, and everybody's pointing at each other, and this owner doesn't have water.
Yeah.
And so I was just kind of curious what the advice might be for sort of, I told this person to sort of follow up with all of these entities, but
Yeah. Yeah, to speak to the water district specifically, if you're having issues or you need help with the water district, we list all of those water districts on our website with contact names and information. I know some of them are smaller and they don't have a lot of staff and it's hard to get a hold of them. We're always happy to help with that and try to make a contact. We might have different contacts than that they.
is that a public works contact, or just if people had questions on sort of?
Yeah, again, it's, the water districts are all their own legal entities, and they have their own boards and their own staff. We'll try to help just to make connections if we can, if they're having problems. With the tree,
Apparently the water district said they gotta go back to the tree company, but the tree company.
well, yeah, and that's, in this situation, yeah, the Jefferson County used to have mediation program that they don't anymore. But there are mediation services out there that we recommend if a constituent or resident is having issues with a company or a neighbor, that they engage in mediation service.
How would they go about getting that?
Yeah, again, Jefferson County used to have it, so we would direct people to Jefferson County, and it was free, and they stopped doing that. So there's private mediation services out there, but you have to pay for it. And, it's something that I think we're looking at as part of our neighborhood. We've been talking about this a little bit, about coordinating all of our neighborhood type programs so the community knows where to go to for these things. And I would like to propose at some point that we provide some type of mediation connection or service. We either maybe pay for a portion of it so people don't, maybe a few hours or something if they want to do more. So I think that's something we should do as a city, maybe down the road, at least provide better resources, but we don't today.
I'd love to support that in the future, and I will follow up with you
Okay.
regarding the specific situation, but thank you.
Yep.
Counselor Hutchinson and then Councilman Osselbeck.
Thank you. I just want to state that I'm very grateful about the elderly lady who was dropped off at Anderson Park a week or so ago, was found safe 8 days later. So that's amazing. Of course, she was found in Edgewater, many miles away, but at least she was found. So I just wanted to...
Thank you. Councilor Osselbeck.
Thanks. I think this is a question for Mary Ann about, I was just wondering, I got a question from a constituent about if we have any kind of turf removal incentives. I just was wondering if Sustainable Wheat were just doing anything with like xeriscaping or...
We don't have anything right now, but if that's something that City Council would like to support in the future, we're more than happy to include that as part of the next year's budget.
Well, it was just a question from a constituent on whether, so I don't know if we're there yet, but
Yeah, we've gotten a couple questions about e-bikes lately and the water heater, so we're getting some of the questions from our neighboring communities to see if we offer the same things. Right now, we don't.
Okay.
But if that's something that City Council would like to expand our services,
Yeah,
we can
let's
definitely
do
talk
it.
about.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead. Scott, did you just have?
So I had a future study session about, it was about irrigation, reducing irrigation, and if everybody was acceptable, I'd be fine tacking that
Okay, cool.
on to that study session item in the future. It was about, it was about like reducing, what's that?
Mm-hmm.
Regress,
That's
but
what I'm
yeah,
getting
if that sounds reasonable.
And then I just wanted to also remind folks, there's just, I'm sorry, I'm tired all of a sudden. Anderson Park Pool is one of the only outdoor pools in the area that's open right now, and so everybody's there. I was there this weekend, and we still have the lifeguard shortage. And I've heard that there may be more lifeguards coming soon. I don't know, that's the rumor going around. People are being really optimistic. I did not hear that from Patrick or Karen or anyone. It was like a rumor at swim team. Anyway.
Yeah, we've ordered whistles for you all.
So I'm just wanted to, one, remind people that if you're going to Anderson or the rec center right now, you may have a wait time, so don't show up and tell your kids that you're going to be, or yourself, that you're going to be jumping in right away. It'll take a little bit of time, and be patient. The staff has been exceptional and really friendly and working really hard to make sure that people are getting in and out quickly. And then also, if you know anyone who wants to be a lifeguard, please send them to the Wheat Ridge Parks and Rec website and apply today, because we have great pools and we all want to use them. Thanks.
And we also train. So
Yeah, we
everyone
do.
should go get their training
We'll
and
train
then
you.
come. We
There's
train you.
bonuses. We have sign-on bonuses and end-of-season bonuses, so. And if you saw in the World News the other night had a story on this. A third of the pools in the country are closed right now, and
Okay.
Denver just closed 4 pools.
Councilor Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I thought Councilmember Weaver might bring this up, but this Saturday, June 11th, is Art in the Barn, hosted by Local Works, Five Bridges Farm, also sponsored by the Neighborhood Gazette. So there's going to be original artwork, silent auction, hors d'oeuvres, beer, wine, and live music. So get your tickets online at Local Works. We are localworks.org. It's $50 a ticket. I'm really excited about it. We also have a couple of events coming up with Local Works as far as the Ridge Fest on June 18th. And then they're starting to have fitness in the park. So that's really exciting.
Excellent.
And then Dominic Breton asked me to announce that they are having a free cup of coffee tomorrow morning, starting at 9:30 at the Wheat Ridge Visitor Center, which is 7230 West 38th Avenue. And all donations collected will be going to the Foothills Animal Shelter.
Right. Thank you. Councilor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a question. I'm wondering about the pool at the rec center. I thought it was only open for adults.
Depending on staffing, this week, I believe the pool is only open till 11 or 11:30 every day, to allow for some lap swimming and adult swim. It really depends on the staffing we have, so it's changing almost weekly. You kind of got to keep an eye on it. Coffee on the Cop tomorrow, 9 to 11 at Stuyvesant Crate.
Well, we're giving away a lot of coffee. We've got coffee with the mayor. Coffee with the Mayor this Saturday morning at 9 o'clock at Manola's Italian Market and Deli. So if anyone could join us, we'd be glad to have you there. That just about concludes our evening tonight. Thank you all very much, but I would be remiss if I didn't wish our city manager congratulations on his 20th anniversary as an employee in our city.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. With that, if there's no more business to come before us, we will be back a week from tonight at 7 o'clock for a regular meeting. So go out, drive safely in our community, and continue to make this a great place to live, work, and play. Thanks so much. We are adjourned.